our guest is Marvel Joseph. He's an organization development consultant, among other things that he does. Good to have you join us, Marvel.
Good morning. Good morning,
Good morning, Mr. Sen. Good to have. I was telling him I love his fragrance and I'm looking to take it. That's how good, that's how good he smells this morning. Good to have you on the show.
I have to hold my nose. Okay, so Akwa has been boiling in recent time. It started from Eastern Ebolo, spread out to Ibom, and now back to Eastern Ebolo. Different infractions by oil companies, allegedly by the use of the host community. Issues have been raised, the lack of compliance to some of the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act. You're looking at no employment quota or low employment quota for Akwa indigents or the community where these companies are operating on. You're looking at lack of commitment to corporate social responsibility. You're looking at the environmental hazards being done and the lack of regard for environmental safety policies of the federal government of Nigeria. In the line of this, we've seen different infractions, blocking of access ways and access roads to these facilities, and that, of course, as part of engagement to broker a peace deal. We saw the police commissioner in Akwa State, Sifi Baba Muhammad Azare, engage with both the youths of the respective communities in Akwa State and, of course, the leadership of the oil companies to broker a peace deal. One of the concerns that Akwa people have had is that it seems the police commissioner's comment was not balanced when he said youths should not block access road, as opposed to balancing the narrative in the reactions of Akwa youths. Basically, before we get to protest, they must have exhausted all peaceful avenues, and these oil companies failed to come to the negotiation table to talk about these different infractions that the youths have highlighted. And then, of course, there's also an issue of the elders of the community not taking the youths along in the affairs of things. We'd like to get your reaction.
Francis, you see, when it comes to issues of exploration in the country generally, particularly in Akwa State as it stands today, when we have experience of what has been going on in terms of the effect of oil spills in Akwa State, in terms of deprivation of our means of livelihood through what has been devastation of the farmlands and our means of livelihood, fishing settlements and all that. People have reservation about companies coming to operate in this region, especially when they are not transparent enough to discuss the environmental impact assessment reports. You have a lot of organizations coming to do things and you don't have the environmental assessment report. That is on the one hand. On the other hand, you have the PIA that, like you mentioned, you have those should stand as an agreement that if you're operating in an area, you have to recognize what you may call the local content in terms of employment opportunities to indigents of those areas. And this has to be done transparently. The other part to it is the indigents themselves, in terms of the dichotomy that exists between the elders of the community or opinion leaders in the community and other citizens in those communities. How well transparent are they in representing them in meetings and all that? Community engagement is one key part of activities that should not be taken for granted in any way. We should be able to advise organizations coming into operate that take any economic activities in a region to be more open and transparent in their activities and have people engage the community effectively in whatever they want to do. Now, if it has gotten to this stage where disruptive activities are ongoing, then the Commissioner of Police coming in, he may not be an expert in that area of community relations as it stands. So his comments may be taken as part of police comments in terms of his eagerness to make sure that there is peace
Peace and order.
in orderliness in the community. Whatever he has said, we should come back to address the community itself, the elders of those communities, the leadership of those communities. We see a lot going wrong because of the way we live our traditional system. You see, traditional rulers are just like de facto leaders in their communities. But these are people that should be key in every government. We remember those days we used to have House of Chiefs, and we have them in government. So you have the State Assembly, you also have the House of Chiefs contributing to governance. So if there is an issue that is coming up in the state or in their locality, they should be able to formulate policies or have input in those things that can become law, can be processed for it to become law. But you no more have that. So you have people that may not be very, very much vested with the traditional ways of doing things, or even in this case, you may have people making decisions that are not too familiar with the circumstances of those communities. So if we are talking about engaging people in employment, how are you going about it? Do you even have the number of people that are not employed in those communities? And do you have the number of people that are employable in those communities? Do you have data to use in discussing these things and making objective decisions regarding this kind of situation? So the situation we are having now is something that should challenge our minds about this kind of development and where it could lead us to. People should think about how to encourage engagement, community engagement in anything that they want to do in a community. In this regard, I think we should call on the House of Assembly member that is representing those areas that are being affected, the local government people, and now try to see how we can involve the traditional rulers also in this kind of situation to see how they can team up or take it as a collective responsibility to see what advice or how to go about resolving this issue without making it sound as if we are just making policies or giving a command that, oh, leave the road, go back to your houses. It shouldn't be. We should be able to say that this is the published environmental impact report from these communities. We should be able to say we are open enough to say in engaging employees in this organization, this is the number of people from this community.
Yeah.
We look for expertise in this area we did not find in this community. That is how we went to another area to get this expertise. We had a lot of situations during the time of mobile producers that they will come up to tell us that we don't have qualified hands in this area. No, it shouldn't be so. We should have open advertisement and give priority to the indigents of those areas, except we do not have this required skill for a certain level. And even at that, we should begin to train people to see how they can come up to have to develop skills to come and fill up positions in the organization. So when you talk about staff placement in those organizations upcoming, we talk about especially the effect of, we know that there were so many health effects from oil exploration activities. You have people living in those areas suffering cancer and all sorts of health issues in those areas. We also know how it deprives us of our traditional means of livelihood, which is farming and fishing. So any company that is coming into them, we would not be surprised if our problem people becomes apprehensive to say, what are you coming to, what are you doing, show us. So it is for those companies coming in to be transparent, those people guiding them to our problems to also try to be very transparent to avoid this kind of situation that we're having today. It's not really the police responsibility.
I think there's a larger call for transparency on the side of these organizations, because sometimes even when you try to listen to the mitigations, you see the companies trying to cover up issues. But two key features out of the PIA Act of 2021 that I see that should cover host communities. There was a creation of a host community trust fund, which should make funds available for the development of the host communities. How many of these organizations are living up to that expectation? We also see the creation of an environmental remediation fund, something that you've already touched on. all of these funds, these companies, for instance, in the last month, I think two oil servicing companies have come into Akwa Ibom. They had gone to greet the governor and introduce themselves. In coming in, has the state government, with the stakeholders in this community, sat down with the PIA Act and say, okay, to come into our communities, these are the requirements. Are you willing to live up to them? But I think from the police angle, because I'd like for you to speak to the youth, oftentimes also these hostilities drive out these investors from our environment. At the end of the day, we are losing on both sides. Is there a way you think that these youth can engage these organizations? Are there people that can say, hey, look, these funds that were meant to be generated for the environment, where is it? And when it is generated, who does it go to? And what is it used for in the communities?
Well, if you're looking at, you see, the citizens, the youths are on the receiving end when it comes to these economic activities. So you would have to say there are more powerful people and there are less powerful people receiving the consequences of these decisions or resultant effect of these activities that are going on in these communities. If we have government in place, if we have leadership in these communities, if we have opinion leaders in these communities, we call it stakeholders in the communities. If anything goes wrong in a particular community, the stakeholders of that community would have to be the ones held responsible. You have the company that is involved, you have the government or the local government, from the local government, or the three tiers of government should be seen as stakeholders in this thing before you come to the community itself that are going to bear the brunt of all this. So if it happens today that there are protests going on in these areas, it is affecting other people's economic activities in those areas.
People are losing lives.
A lot of lives may be lost in the trial. I don't know whether lives has been lost or not.
Like, even when you go back to history, before now, these things happen.
Yeah. Till today, we are still discussing the cleanup of Ogoni land and all that. All the oil spill that has been happening in Akwa Ibom. So to what extent have they cleaned up Akwa Ibom State? You have people suffering so many economic problems in Akwa Ibom State following these exploration activities in Akwa Ibom. So today, I wouldn't, if you allow things to degenerate and the youth have stood on the streets to say this is what it should be. How did we get there in the first place? So in resolving these things, we should speak more to the stakeholders regarding finding solutions to what is happening in those areas.
Okay. I also think that, don't you think that punishment for these organizations, these airing organizations, whether it's a suspension of their licenses, whatever it would take for you to make sure that they do right? Because part of the issues we see also is that in the likes of Mobile that have now moved out of the country and all these other companies that have moved out, when they spill and leave the problems, who is going to clean it up? We just let them go. There needs to be implementation of punitive measures for airing organizations.